Who likes numbers? Since I was a little kid, I've loved the numbers. Sport was also cool too. As a child in Sydney's Sutherland Shire, I followed the Sharks, the rugby league team. I liked that their progression over the year was measured on a competition ladder. I remember working out my own updated ladders in an exercise book on Sunday nights after the games, and then the thrill of checking the Sun newspaper that Dad would bring home on Mondays to see if my ladder checked out. I also loved maps and atlases. I could look at these things all day. So human geography, how people, place and the environment relate, fascinated me as a kid. Although the rest of the world seems so far away from the deep south of the Anglo-Saxon White Shire. I lost my virginity at age 20. It all happened so suddenly and to a new love. So supporting the Sharks until then was nice. We were close. There was some intimacy, but the RPM Marconi game, my first real football game, in Sydney's inner west is where it happened for the first time. So up until then, I had no idea about soccer or this NSL thing until that day. I'm not even sure why me and my Shire buddies went that sunny Saturday. So we drank at the Lewisham Hotel and then strolled down to Lambert Park where the game had already started. So just approaching the ground, I was feeling a vibe so different to a rugby league game. We jumped the fence and absorbed and watched the atmosphere from the roof of the Dunnies. Lambert Park was cosy and packed. It was the Italian derby, Apia Leichhardt against Marconi, and Apia had 1982 World Cup star Francesco Graziani on the pitch. We eventually mingled with the crowd, and I even have video evidence, which you just missed unless you were watching carefully, of running onto the field and trying to touch this guy I'd never even heard of before this day. My second game was just a few weeks later at the same venue. Apia were playing Sydney, Croatia. It was my first experience with a Balkan crowd. Their passion was another eye-opener. I bought my first NSL annual that year and must have read this thing hundreds of times. I just wanted to know more about the games, the players, the teams in this NSL. The 1988 annual also covered the national teams, the state leagues, women's, amateurs, indoor, so many dimensions. Hungry for history and knowledge, I just wanted to know more and more, but I couldn't find it. Before I knew it, I was spending hours a week at the uni library, looking through old Sydney Morning Heralds and building up my own notes and stats. I got a little obsessed with the Balkans, especially Croatia. In 1989, we were buying Croatian memorabilia at the sports centre out there at Adensa Park. I helped create the Miranda Croatia Soccer Club. No Croats in the team, by the way. And joined the Macquarie University Croatian Society. Things were heating up in the Balkans themselves, and we got to experience it here in many ways. At the Hajduk Split, as the Hajduk Split team lined up before their 1990 friendly against the Socceroos at Parramatta Stadium, the Croatian players symbolically ripped off their shirt emblems emblazoned with the red star, a symbol of Serb-dominated Socialist Yugoslavia. The crowd cheered and I was fascinated. What's going on here? After moving to Canberra in 1991, I joined the promotions committee of New South Wales First Division Canberra Croatia, or Canberra Metro. Tom Samani was coaching. Steve Dospite also there, who surely in an Australian first that year postponed a fixture against the Serbian-backed Avala in protest to conflict going on overseas. So it was early in the Yugoslav Civil War. Some Croatian National Guard had just been killed in a Serbian army offensive. And yeah, that was the official reason given by Canberra Metro, Canberra Croatia, for calling off this game. So mine was a morbid fascination perhaps, but a sympathetic one, and not just for the Croats. I know they gave it back. But that other side of the world that seemed so far from the Shire was now so much closer. Via SBS TV and radio, I watched and listened to overseas football. It didn't matter if it was in English, Italian or Serbo-Croat. I became obsessed with the game in Australia particularly the NSL and the Socceroos. So I travelled interstate, especially for the big NSL derbies, and did some active. There's some photos there of the RG game in 1991. Our pyro was like 30 sparklers. The banner up the top, Ultra Socceroo Fanatics. I reckon that was the biggest banner at the time. I made that in the backyard, and just got right into it. And I was collecting the stats, as I collected whatever Australian soccer newspapers I could and entered data from such as lineups from NSL games. This took years. In the meantime, I was writing bits and pieces. I was chuffed at seeing my first Statsy article in a Soccer Australia magazine in 1992 on the final system. I did a little bit of non-stats writing, including match day reports for my ACT 5th Division side, ANU, Australian National University. So I had a lot of fun with these. So in the weekly mag, for the match reports, I would mix real-life Australian soccer personalities with our actual game events, and never forgetting to promote the NSL. My information-based pieces at the time included this gem from the 1996 Australian Soccer and Cyberspace, this internet thing. So this covered our pioneering work on ozfootball.net. I was uploading a lot of my work on ozfootball, organised what must have been one of the very first online footy tipping comps with the A-League, or the NSL back then, and coordinated some very early online discussion groups. I also wrote in the matchday programs for several clubs, including the mighty Canberra Cosmos. But my obsession was with the numbers. Quantifying the game whatever way I could was my way of understanding and learning about it. From exercise books and folder paper, I progressed to the PC and utilised the power of the database. Assisted by my uni studies and as a professional statistician now with the Australian Bureau of Statistics, I also learnt tricks to explore the data in ways I wasn't really seeing in the media, like longest winning streaks, goal scoring milestones. NSL crowds were on the up in the mid-90s and no one was promoting it. I started sending the occasional fax to media and governing bodies. SBS TV first gave my stats air in October 96, and I was thrilled when Johnny Warren thanked me on air for the first time. Meanwhile, I'd moved to Adelaide. In 1996, I joined Cumberland United Amateurs, where my window to the world continued as captain of a team of Baha'i Persian Australians. With my dear suffering wife, we had two boys, Oliver and Reuben. Ollie and Roo, got a nice little piece there in a Inside Soccer Mag back in 1999 about Ollie and Roo. Who, you want a good stat, on Thursday, the Japan game, 24th of March, their combined ages is exactly 50 years old in years and days. Okay. Soccer Australia brought me on board as their honorary statistician leading to the Sydney Olympics. Right, in year 2000, I wrote my first official NSL media guide, continue today. I started being used more and more for other Soccer Australia publications, to the point that I was editor of the last ever NSL Matchday program in 2004. Throughout the final NSL season, I also produced Adelaide United's first weekly magazine. That was a real eye-opener and really good experience. And yeah, look, it was a fascinating time to be involved, to have this involvement with the governing body, the ASA back then. So 2004, the Australian Women's Soccer Association was absorbed into the Australian Soccer Association, as were their stats. The Men's A-League then kicked off with league head Matt Carroll, not really wanting the stats connected with the NSL, which we fixed up in time. And after a few years of prodding by FFA, I created the first listing of men's and women's national team caps in consultation with many involved in the game. So since then, I've statted for various people, organisations and outlets, including media, governing bodies and players' unions. For years, I did live stats for Fox Sports, games from Adelaide, and there's been some international work. And so what you were getting from me 25 years ago is basically what you're getting from me now, a focus on reporting and promoting the game in Australia through fact-based data with a mixture of fun stuff. While there's been an unbroken relationship with the national governing body for more than 2 decades, I'm an independent Statto who does this mostly for the love and a hobby. My day job for the last 30 years is as a demographer with the ABS. So I enjoyed both of these roles, the official football and population Statto, which have connected me with some awesome people over the years. All right, stats party time. I don't think I would have been allowed here if I didn't actually show some stats. So here are some of my favourites from over the years. It's a bit of a hard choice, but yeah, I had a few here. So look, I still think it's cool that the first player to score in an Australian National Soccer League game ended up being the first player to score 100 goals, John Cosmina. He scored for West Adelaide against Canberra City on the 2nd of April 1977, so a matchday program on the screen with newspaper report as well, and reached a century of NSL goals in mid-1985. And I think that week, Cozzy, you just played in a World Cup qualifier. There was about 3 games you'd played in the previous week. Maybe it was it was for Polonia, I think, in the State League. I'm telling you, yeah. Look, it's that's what you did. Like, it was just amazing. This 1 week that the NSL was starting. Cozzy was jetting around the country and scored the first game there. Yep. So Cozzy first player to score 100. Can anyone guess who the next player was to score 100 goals? National League goals. Gary Cole. Very good. Good on you, Tony. Of course. And by the way, it's the 45th anniversary of the first NSL game next Saturday. So raise a glass next Saturday night, or whatever you're doing. Okay, what's also cool is the very first men's A-League game in 2005 still remains the only A-League game without a player raised overseas. So all local players, that very first game at whatever it's called then, Hunter Stadium, that Friday night. I'm pretty sure that's still right. It was a couple of years ago when I last checked. Okay, now I use Twitter a lot to notify major milestones that would probably otherwise go under the radar, such as Miss Melissa Barbieri's 25-year-long Australian National League career. She had no idea. The club had no idea. My Twitter can also be a way of tracking movements until I notify them, and then they promoted that really well. Love that. And then my Twitter is also a way of tracking movements such as Jamie McLaren's current rise up the all-time National League scorers ladder. I also use Twitter to point to my graphics guides and maps, such as the interactive FFA or Australia Cup map and men's and women's national team player tracker. So if you see any of these on Twitter and there's a link and you've got half a minute, click on the link and you can start playing with maps. You can start exploring players, or match venues, players. Pick anyone who's played for the men or the women's national teams, and you'll get this this animated chart map of where those players are playing. Sorry for all you in the corner. You can check the links later on. You can't see the screen. Okay, I also have a lot of fun with player names. In fact, the name thing is where I got my first run in a mainstream newspaper 22 years ago. When Mike Cockrell, rest in peace, published this obscurity, I had faxed to him. So it's when Melbourne Knights player Toyin Abbas came up against Elliot Zwangobani, I think that's the pronunciation, of the Canberra Cosmos. So Mike seemed to be as excited as I was that this was when you list every National League player in alphabetical order, and there was, 3,000 at the time, Abbas was first and Zwangobani was last. So, and Mike was great because he also helped explain why it was such a coincidence that these 2 players came up against each other, given that they had very short NSL careers. Now, long player names also always seem to get a lot of love on Twitter. So, of the almost 5,000 all-time National League players' names, 3 have the equal most number of letters. You wouldn't believe how often I get this query. Richard Bassingthwaite, Nick Theodorakopoulos, and Jacinto Galabata Arachichi have 16-letter surnames. And I just love, just those 3 names is just a great representation of, there's a Anglo-Celtic or whatever. UK name up there, the Greek name second, and Jacinta's Sri Lankan surname, I'm pretty sure that is. Okay, close behind are the Constantinopolis and Stamatolopoulos, 3 of each. And how's this? So in 1983, George Constantopoulos was replaced by Theo Stamatolopoulos. And then 24 years later, Nathan Constantinopoulos was replaced by Apostolos Stamatolopoulos. And they were both replaced in the 83rd minute. And there's the proof there from the onlines. In 1998, Vasily Kalogerakos scored a hat-trick after coming on as a sub for Slobodan Despotovski. So while it is extremely rare for a sub to score a hat-trick, just less than a year later, Despotovski did it after coming on for Kalogerakos. Man, this turned me on. And perhaps, I haven't got to the extent of quantifying numbers of syllables and names, but yeah, Vasily Kalogerakos and Slobodan Despotovski probably have a very high number of syllables, relatively speaking. Okay, short names can be fun too. All right, so Brenton Speed liked this one that I mentioned on Twitter once. I think he saw a tweet of mine at halftime of a game and messaged me to confirm. I'm guessing the audio is not going to work. So I'll have to paraphrase. If it's not working, it's not going to work, is it? No. Okay, so Speedy and Slady had a lot of fun with this. And Speedy's good. He helped explain it as well. He basically said this is the first time in the history of the Australian National League that every name in a starting 11 has been under 7 characters. And he went on with Slater. They made fun about my, good-natured fun about my nerdiness. Andy Howe, take a bow or have a good hard look at yourself.
Remiss of me, Robbie, not to mention a statistic that has come to the attention of Andy Howe Statto. Look at those names.
Yeah, I'm looking.
There aren't too many characters there, are there?
They fit quite easily on the team sheet. There's no doubt about that.
That is the first time in the history
Wait for it.
of the Australian National League.
Here it comes.
7,175 games that every name in a starting 11 has been under 7 characters. Andy Howe Statto, take a bow or have a good hard look at yourself.
Exactly. That's extraordinary.
Okay, the skis. The most skis in a starting 11 was 8. Okay, I was supposed to practice these on the way down. Zoran Bizimovsky, Zoran Trajchevsky, Zoran Tasevsky, Trist Trainovsky, Nikola Avramovsky, Spasen Nedevsky, John Markowski and Nikola Chukulovsky. So they were the 8 starting players in this Preston team in 1992. And what's more, Bizimovsky was replaced by Robert Stoichevsky, who himself was replaced by Nikola Lazarevsky. So we had 10 skis appearing for Preston Macedonia that day. As for the Vich brothers and sisters, not as impressive. You might be surprised. So while the Footscray JUST squads of the mid to late 80s had players such as Rade Bajektarovic, Suleiman Churovic, Drago Dijankovic, Zoran Dimitrijevic, Zoran Nikitovic, Alex Radivojevic, and Vojislav Vukcevic, never had more of 4 of the Vich brothers played in the one team. Rhyming names are also fun. Not long ago, Wellington's David Hall had the chance to score against Adelaide's David Ball, Stephen Hall, which I initially said was the first rhyming scorer-keeper pair since Danny Ward scored against Paul Ford in 1986, until somebody mentioned on Twitter that Andy Keogh scored against Michael Theo much more recently. So yeah, I love this friendly interaction, and I'm happy to promote any corrections to my tweets, especially the fun stuff. All right, did you know that in the last men's grand final, Launceston-born Nathaniel Atkinson was the all-time southernmost-born scorer in a men's or women's National League grand final? The previous most southern-born grand final scorer was Costa Barbarouses, who actually scored in the same game. All right, so while this is a completely useless statistic. It's an example of the diversity of the database, where I can link games, events, teams and players with things such as player demographics. In my database, I assign latitude and longitude to anything I can give a location, like match venue, birthplace or nationality. And yeah, this lets me map the crap out of almost anything. The 2015 Men's Asian Cup saw my three worlds of football, population and geography collide. So did you know, up until the last day of the group stage, the Asian Cup, the most populated country won every game? Until Bahrain. Spoiled the party by beating Qatar. Although Qatar, 90% of their population are expats. So anyway, so fortunately, this pattern of most populated countries winning didn't carry on to the knockout stage, because that's where Australia met China. And in a real cool coincidence, from that massive final against South Korea, that was played in the Australian suburb, which has the highest proportion of Korean-born residents in Australia. So that turned me on as well. 13% of that suburb are actually Homebush, born in South Korea, according to the awesome census. Okay, the recent influx of African Australians has been a cool story to quantify. A few years ago, I helped Michael Lynch with this story, and there's been a big focus on African players in my last couple of official A-League men season guides. And yeah, if you haven't downloaded the current men's and women's league guides, make sure you do. There's more than 500 pages of stats and history, with the men's league info going back to 1977 and the women's data going back 25 years. So these are linked in my my Twitter profile. I can Google search. Cool. Yep, been going 20 minutes. So just checking. I haven't been raving too much. All right, encyclopedias. Okay, a really exciting chapter in my life as a soccer statto started when Benita asked if I wanted to write an encyclopedia of men's and women's all-time national team players. Sure, I said. I did. In 2018, we published the Encyclopedia of Socceroos. So this 200,000 word beast has an entry for all 600 or so A international players, Socceroos, and has appendices of stats, maps, and the like. A couple of years ago, Gregor and I did the Encyclopedia of Matildas, which will be updated next year, including some long overdue entries for the 1975 team. This year, the 100th anniversary of the men's team, we're publishing the Centenary edition of the men's encyclopedia. So this will have updated profiles for the active players and biographies for all the new Socceroos since 2018. A couple more were added a couple of days ago, and of course updated stats. But what I'm really looking forward to sharing with the Centenary edition is the inclusion of biographies for the 324 non-A Socceroos. So these are players who have only played for Australia against international opposition, but not in official A international games. So including games such as the touring English FA side in the 20s, against club teams, Man United, New York Cosmos, AC Milan. And from the screen you can see we're mostly talking, I've just got the key figure there is 24 extra biographies that are being added, and a bit of a timeline. We're mainly talking players from pre-1960. The most recent non-A international player is Kasper Tafta. He played for the Socceroos against a Dutch club just before the 2006 World Cup, but hasn't actually played an official A international. An example of an entry in the next edition. Okay, so compared to the A international players, we have a much more diverse collection of players in terms of their countries of origin. So when we include these non-A players, I'm still working on this, but I'm up to around 46 different countries of birth, with Uruguay now included, with Fornaroli's debut a couple of days ago. In terms of where players are raised, we've got 8 countries, and also several more dual internationals, players who have played for Australia and another country. In terms of regional representation, so what I've done is I've assigned each player to where within Australia they were raised or where they were first landed from overseas. So by member federation. It's New South Wales which still has the most players, whether we're talking all A internationals or all internationals. However, adding all these non-A players gives us another 80 Victorians, another 60 South Australians, and Tasmania, bottom row of data. Okay, there's only been 2 Tasmanians that have played an official A international, but another 17 have played in these non-A internationals, which you can read about in the next encyclopedia. Oh yeah, and broken down into capital city raised and regional raised. Numbers up on the screen there as well. Okay, so and aspects such as Indigenous origin, not so sure. I'm a bit more hesitant to put stats up there because lack of information, basically. I mean, I know of 7 Indigenous Socceroos in total, but I'm sure there's more information just not available. But yeah, another interesting dimension there. Okay, so while I think this stuff is fascinating, what's really blown me away about researching for these non-A players is the range of their individual stories. All right, and I initially prepared this couple minutes summary of a couple of players mentioning names, but I thought, no, I better take the names out. I should you got to buy the book if you want to know who these players are. But anyway, this guy I didn't cross out the names on my notes. He migrated from Scotland to rural South Australia as part of a farm apprenticeship scheme. He enlisted in the AIF, Infantry Forces, in 1915. He fought in Gallipoli in France. Following a game in 1929, he was stabbed in the eye by a foreigner, according to that newspaper report, in a fierce brawl outside Adelaide's Bucks Head Hotel, from where he was taken to hospital and had his left eye removed. He returned to play later in the season. This bloke, his frequent moves between Adelaide and Sydney included a well-publicised trip by bicycle via Melbourne, as you do in the 1920s, leaving his wife in 1930. Leaving his wife and children in South Australia, his 3-week trek with luggage was made to secure work in Sydney and return to playing with Gladesville. He returned to Adelaide on his bike after the 1932 season. Worked on the Sydney Harbour Bridge. This guy, I'll tell you his full name because I love it so much, but he comes under a different name in the book. Clavering Joshua Samuel Power. Following a worldwide call for Jewish volunteers in the late 1930s, he travelled with his wife, herself an Australian Women's Army Service Corporal, to Palestine in the early 40s. So he joined the Jewish Liberation Army and helped create the first Israeli Air Force. This was a great one because in my database I had him up until 1942, Victorian player stats, and then next reference was like 1951. I always wondered where he was those 9 years, and there he was helping create the first Israeli Air Force, and he played for Australia. One appearance in 1939. This guy died along with 7 other air officers, when in a flying boat that crashed just after takeoff in Port Moresby Harbour during World War II, and he was just 23 years old. So he's the youngest. This is the youngest any Australian senior national team player has died. 23 years old, as I say, and despite that, I mean, this is like the research I'm doing when writing up the bios, looking for newspaper articles, and he just did so much in obviously such a short life. Doug Stewart, I'm going to actually tell you his name because it's too much to resist. Now, this guy played 2 games for Australia in the 50s, born in central Burma, began playing at school in the Himalayas, spotted by Burmese selectors while playing at Burma Rice Mills Football Club, played with Rajasthan in India, represented Burma at the 1954 Asian Games, and then moved to Perth where he won titles as a player coach, later lived in New Guinea, coached in Sydney, Canberra, NT, Queensland, and ran a sports development program in Brunei. Amazing. He's got a book out, so I haven't got my hands on that, but I've got to get it. I only just realised he's done a book. Okay, and yeah, look, still working on the Encyclopedia of Socceroos Centenary edition and looking out for part of this extra research is finding out when the first born Socceroo was born. Looks like 1886. The young deaths, I mentioned one of those. Another youngish death was Bill Harburn. He died in the Westgate Bridge disaster in Melbourne in 1970, former Socceroo. I always love finding the first players born in particular countries or particular regions of the world. In 1920s, we had players born in Egypt. We had a player born in Guyana. Angus Marshall, Queensland player from the 20s, born in Guyana. Sets of brothers, fathers, sons. Quantifying all these wonderful nuggets of information is a fun part of putting this together. Players who represented other countries, including against Australia, and then they end up playing for Australia. And players who have excelled in other sports. And I'm looking for bona fide, Sheffield Shield players, for example, here. If they say, a lot of players' profiles will say, they love their cricket or whatever, but it's great finding cross-checking with official stats from other sports. So a few Socceroos have played at the Sheffield Shield level in cricket, for example. All right, look, I'm still working on a few things. There's one guy, Guido Puttoni, played for Australia in 1954. Now, there's several reports saying he played in the first ever Yugoslav basketball team in 1946. He came from, Italian name, but it came from an area that sort of did transfer from Italy to Yugoslavia in the late 40s. So, still chasing that one up. Wim Westerveld, Bill Westerveld, a Dutch player, played for New Zealand against Australia and then played for Australia against New Zealand. And he reportedly also played for the Netherlands in the first ever FIFA Under-18 national tournament in England in 1948. I just haven't got a lineup for that game. I've seen references to it. But I'd love to be able to confirm that this guy played for 3 national teams. And Skull, where's Lucas? There's one player, I still haven't got his first name. Surname is Skull. And we're looking, we've got a few people on the case here. From 1927, we're browsing newspaper reports, births, deaths and marriages records. And Lucas even got in touch with a family historian, the Melbourne Skull family historian who's helping us out as well. So if anyone knows of Mr. Skull's first name, get in touch. Okay, so that's my exciting life as a soccer statto. What started as a thirst for knowledge about our game turned into being one providing a cocktail of information to others. While it's fun being a fan, the challenge of churning the data into useful and useless facts turns me on big time. And through direct requests, putting information online, and through Fair Play Publishing, I love sharing these stories with you all. So, thanks.